just your Insta game. I mean, did you finish this book and decide to go wild on Insta? Because, your stories are amazing.
I know it. I mean, I think it's just an insight into my diseased mind, as I say.
But you also leave room for a sequel.
The pressure, the pressure.
Hi everyone, this is Parmesh Shahani, and I'm in conversation with Mahesh Rao for the Nod Book Club, who's just come out with this incredible book called Half Light. And Mahesh, lots and lots of love. I'm so
Hello.
happy to be talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this. It's such a pleasure when anyone has read your book, but I'm particularly excited that you've read it.
Yeah, I've read it. Can I just say how much I loved it?
Thank
Um,
you.
and I was at the ending, and first I was like, WTF? And now I'm, after ruminating and reflecting, I'm like, it's deeply satisfying, but you also leave room for a sequel. And I hope that,
The pressure, the pressure. I don't know if I can take this.
and I hope you like the characters as much as I do to actually want to invest in a sequel. But yeah, but before we talk about the book, just your Insta game. I mean, did you finish this book and decide to go wild on Insta? Because your stories are amazing. Where do you find all the crazy things you post? And your vibe on Insta is so different from your books.
I know it. I mean, I think it's just an insight into my diseased mind, as I say. It's. I think it's where I come to be very, very silly, and and silliness is, I think, an essential part of writing and of everything else. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's just there for a bit of fun, really.
Good. So everyone, I mean, if you read Mahesh's book, good. If not, at the very least, follow on Insta. Um, you'll enjoy it, and maybe that'll make you want to read the book. Or the book is a very different vibe. It's a gay love story. It's a coming of age story. It's set against the repeal of Section 377. I want to ask you about the process of research, right? And I was reading up about Polite Society, where you wrote how you integrated yourself into, say, the social scene in Delhi, and how your privilege, whether it's Kenya and the UK, etc., helped you get into that world. So tell me about the research process for Half Light.
Yeah.
How did why did you come up with it, and how do you go about researching and integrating yourself in the world to set it up the way it has been?
Well, first of all, for polite society, I wouldn't say integrate so much as loiter.
Right. Yeah.
Sort of loiter, even when not called upon to do so. But in terms of this, actually, there wasn't that much research that needed to be done, because we kind of know who we are. We know what happened before the judgment came down. We know possibly what's happened since. If anything, it was about the places that the book is set in.
Yeah.
Darjeeling, I've been to a couple of times, and so I had those memories.
Yeah.
I'd spent an incredibly cold winter there once,
Yeah.
in a hotel that isn't as awful as the one in the book, but it wasn't far off.
Yeah.
It was, I'd say, at least a couple of shades better, but it was incredibly cold. No way of heating yourself at all. So it was one of those seasons where you would wear literally everything in your bag at night.
And you
Just
have to find a nice warm body to cuddle against, right?
that is the other option, actually. Yes, the failing the wearing everything you have. So that was sort of purely drawing upon my time spent there.
Yeah.
Bombay was different because it's a city I kind of know quite well, but then you also wonder as an outsider, how well can you know somewhere
Yeah.
if you're not fully from there?
Yeah.
So I was quite interested in setting it in places in and around Mumbai that aren't written about that much. So there are parts of the book that are set in Mankur and other parts in Kalyan and places like that.
And you make a pit stop in Vikhroli
I
appeared. I was like, oh my God.
I do make a pit stop at Vicroly, and I did think of you actually when I was, because I think in some senses you talk about Vicroly probably more than anyone else with a lot of exposure. So I did think about that because you think so carefully about where are you locating these
Yeah.
people and these places, and
Yeah.
it's got to be right and it's got to
Yeah.
be believable.
Yeah.
So Mankur I chose because it seemed like somewhere where someone like Pavan would live, but also because of the salt flats. There is a key scene
Yeah.
which requires them to be there. And Kalyan I chose because I think these sort of satellite cities around our larger metros are really interesting because people don't necessarily portray them in our cultural imagination, but there's there's so much growth happening there. There's so much ambition. There's
Yeah.
so many people with stories who are thinking of moving into the big city. So that's why there's a little flash of Kalyan there too.
Yeah.
So I didn't have to do a lot of research, but you do have to try and be really, really careful when you're writing about something that you're not intimately familiar with.
Yeah.
You've just got to, try and make sure that you're getting it right.
I want to ask you about both Neville and Pavan, right? Or
Yeah,
Pavan?
yeah,
Pavan?
Pavan, yeah.
Pavan. About what I loved is how well defined both of them, are. And while thinking of them, are they composites of people or did you think of them as like archetypes? And why the particular background for each of them?
Yeah. So I think with fiction writers, people do tend to be combinations of people you've either come across or types you've read about, and
Yeah,
you sort of take traits together and you try and come up with someone very whole and believable.
yeah,
But I think my first point of departure was essentially class, because this is a novel as much about class as it is about sexuality or
yeah,
anything else.
yeah,
And it was really important to me that they come from very different backgrounds
yeah,
and that there is this sort of friction when they meet, after they meet, when they meet again,
yeah,
which has very much to do with what is at stake for each of them
yeah,
with coming out. The
yeah,
stakes are very different for Pavan, who is less privileged, who has everything to lose if he were to be outed, and for Neville, less so. I mean, he's also someone who's not open with his family, but he has less to lose. So they come from these very different backgrounds, and that was really important to me because that is kind of also how encounters very often work.
yeah,
When you meet randomly, when you have no way of knowing who this person is. But in terms of them themselves, I mean, I think Neville. We've all known Nevilles quite closely. I mean, especially if
and
you live in a big Indian city, there are lots of
some of
Nevilles
us were
around.
Nevilles. Some of us
Have you
were.
met Nevilles before?
I mean, I think I've been Neville my whole life, but and
This is the thing. I think, we are familiar with him, or we have been him, or, and
yeah,
hopefully we've changed after being him. He is someone, who's got his face pressed against the glass of a certain kind of big city society.
yeah,
He's not part of the elite, but he can access it in various ways.
yeah,
And he's hungry for lots of things, but he's also incredibly lazy. So he doesn't quite know what to do to
yeah,
get there.
yeah,
So, and he's young. I think more than anything, he's young. He's still forming those parts of his personality, which is why he's also so fallible.
yeah,
Pavan, I think, is very different.
yeah,
He's got a kind of a very moral core at his center.
yeah,
He's sort of someone who's always trying to do the right thing,
yeah,
but also he's confident in his own ways. Even though he's from a less privileged background, he's confident about his abilities, and I think we see that through the novel. His own social mobility, his own attempts and successful attempts at making his way in the world,
yeah. It's a
even though
blossoming of Pavan, I mean, throughout the novel in a way, right? I mean, that
yeah.
it's just he emerges. Yeah,
Exactly, exactly. He starts off as the much more tentative character,
yeah,
and then as you see him progress through the novel, the
yeah,
tables sort of turn quite quickly,
yeah,
and I think that's interesting because
yeah,
it makes you wonder, where are these guys going to end up?
yeah. Well, Marine Drive, but
Well, Marine Drive, absolutely. I should actually tell you that the Marine Drive climactic scene, as I'm going to call it very grandly,
yeah,
is the very first scene that I wrote for the book. So I knew absolutely how it would end and where it would end. And I knew that it could not end anywhere but Marine Drive.
of course, it's so. I mean, that was my thing. It's so filmy,
Yeah.
this, but even Polite Society, they're both so filmy. So, I mean, what's the deal? I mean, are the Netflix series happening? What is happening? Where is the stories and who's playing who? I mean,
Well, that we will talk about. Well, Polite Society was optioned, and
yeah,
I was very happy that it was optioned for for quite a long time. But
yeah,
then COVID happened, and it all
yeah,
sort of fell apart. But
yeah.
that's just the way of these
But
things.
Half Light is I mean, it's total. Like, who would play Neville and Pavan if like it was greenlit right now? I mean,
I,
who amongst our current
I
crop?
don't know. You'll have to tell me. Actually, I mean, I would certainly love to be someone very quiet at the back of those casting meetings.
Mine is Neville should be Ahaan Pandey.
Right?
Um,
Okay.
of course, I mean, and I think Pavan could be maybe Taha. Maybe Taha. I mean, might be,
Right. Okay.
but I mean,
Well,
there's lots of,
I
yeah,
think this is for other people to say, really, because of what they see in the characters.
completely, completely.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I also want it to be big and blockbuster, right? I'm fed up of these small, cute gays. I mean, I want a gay blockbuster. I don't want one sweet art house kind of thing.
I mean, you're speaking my language. We want house full boards
Yeah,
again.
I want big stars. I mean, big stars, big budgets. I mean,
Yeah.
we deserve
Absolutely.
our own Switzerland songs. I mean, chalo Darjeeling, but they can do a dream sequence.
Darjeeling, but mountainous. Kind of
You
vaguely
can do a
mountainous.
dream sequence in Switzerland from Darjeeling. I mean, whatever. So yeah, um, I hope all of that happens because it's such. And when you're talking about Pavan right now, at least the character hits so close to home because I was recently in a relationship with someone who's very, very closeted, and just the way you've described the inner landscape and turmoil, the way you've described, the I mean, we understand him so much because we go back to where he came from. We go back to, the encounter, the father. I mean, as you said, it's class, sexuality, but also caste in so many ways. Also, what boundaries can one cross, can one not cross? And so his journey, his emergence is so much more, uh, I think, strong.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that the book is very much about is the different ways in which you can be closeted.
Yeah, yeah,
Pavan's is almost a desire to shut down desire, as it were.
yeah,
His aim is to completely bury any notion of desire, whereas Neville is utterly brazen. He's sort of avid with desire,
yeah,
and it's kind of it's how he really flourishes.
yeah,
He's sort of intoxicated with his youth
yeah,
and his ability to attract men.
yeah,
And it is intoxicating. It can be incredibly heady.
yeah,
But his thing is always, you know. And one eye out for what's happening around him all the time, any opportunities that present themselves.
yeah,
But at home, he's not out. He's secretive and he's mysterious. And these are two very different ways of being
yeah.
closeted, but they both come from that deep well of repression in the case of these two characters.
Yeah, and you've also written them both with such humor and tenderness at the same time, like with Neville and so many others, but also with Pavan, where he rejects the arranged marriage proposal. I mean, that whole scene and the Rupa underwear answer is so wonderful. You take something which is so serious and so, I mean, this happens in the lives of so many Indian gay men, right?
Right. No,
Lighten
completely.
it, but you lighten it with the Rupa underwear so beautifully.
Yeah, if anyone from Rupa is watching, totally open for a collab. So if the thing is that scene with the Rishta scene,
Yeah,
basically,
yeah, yeah,
it is something that feels like almost a rite of passage
yeah,
in any person's life in India,
yeah,
unless you're from an especially progressive family or
yeah,
something like that. But
yeah,
it feels like man, woman, whatever your sexuality, this possibility at least will be presented to you at some point.
yeah, yeah,
And many people succumb. They
yeah,
kind of go through it
yeah,
and they have no options, or they feel they have no options, and they end up married to someone they don't want to be married to. And this happens to straight and gay people, of course.
Yeah.
But I really wanted to include that scene because I think it chimes very greatly with a desire for connection that
Yeah.
all of us have,
Yeah.
but also a fear of what the future might hold, a fear of where we will be pushed into. And in that scene, that counts for both Pavan and for the girl
Yeah.
that he's being introduced to, because
Yeah.
she has her own aspirations, she
Yeah.
has her own life,
Yeah.
and it's actually it's two terrified people on one balcony is basically that scene.
I could see him being friends with her after he comes out, and I could see
Yeah,
them being really good friends. I mean,
actually, that's true. That they have a connection that comes out of their shared
yeah.
fear,
Yeah.
and a kind of mutual respect as well.
Yeah.
But the mechanics of it and the
Yeah.
people that surround them
Yeah.
are truly terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing, right? So to me, that's the pivotal moment for Pavan because, he sees, and you're right, he sees how easy it would be to just say yes, right? And
Yeah,
it would be so easy. It would solve
yeah.
so many of his challenges.
Yeah,
But
that's the
he's,
thing, and I
yeah,
think, I mean, we know that so many queer people
yeah,
are married in,
yeah.
to people that they don't want to be married to. We know that for
Because
a
being
fact.
yourself is hard.
It is,
Yeah.
and sometimes it could be
Yeah.
as much as your life being at stake.
Yeah.
So there's no blame attached to these things
Yeah.
necessarily.
Yeah.
I think you have to look at the whole thing through whatever compassion you can.
Yeah. And that's why, I mean, to me, Half Light is so much about morality, right? This idea of fraud, of deception, of deceiving others, but also one's own self. And,
Yeah,
who are we really? Are we the stories we tell others about ourselves, or are we something,
yeah,
that we look inside ourselves and find and often don't like? And
yeah.
to me, that's also the string that connects Polite Society with Half Light, because both, in a sense, are excavations of yours of this, really, of the
That's
characters.
true, actually. Yeah, yeah. I hadn't thought of it that way, but that is true. Yeah,
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about Audrey, Lorna. I mean, kind of lesbian vibe you were hinting at, or like not, but I totally read it as, but also all the other women in the book who maybe are side dishes to Pavan and Neville in a sense, or maybe they're not. And yeah, so,
actually, can I ask you? Have you read Alan Hollinghurst's last novel? Uh, I think it's called All the Evenings. These evenings, something like that. Sorry, my
yeah,
mind's just gone a
yeah,
bit blank.
yeah,
But anyway, it's his last novel,
yeah,
and my book had already been acquired. It was on its way to being published,
yeah,
and in that novel, the Hollinghurst novel, there is a mother who has a close friendship
yeah,
with a woman, and they start to live together.
yeah.
And I was suddenly getting shivers down my spine, thinking, oh my god, people are going to think that I just stole this whole
No, no,
relationship from the eminently better Alan Hollinghurst. But actually that goes off in a very different direction,
yeah,
and they do turn out to be queer in
yeah.
that book. So the story here is something very different. I think it's
Companionship. It's
it is
companionship.
companionship, and it is also a kind of friendship born out of fear and regret and a desire to make amends. All of these things. So it's quite a complex tangle in this Mangalorian Catholic
Or
household.
Lorna could be queer for sure, but maybe Audrey isn't.
Yeah, I mean, I feel definitely Audrey isn't,
Yeah.
but Lorna, yeah, we could have hopes for her, sure.
And
you
but
know,
I also like how, in a sense, because I mean, in the bit where you describe, and if I want to read out this bit, it's on page 45, and when you talk about how, of Neville, right, and you talk
yeah,
about how he had a strong sense of his own ability in attracting men, which we just spoke about. There were plenty of successes, but so many failures, etc. Audrey's reach, however, seemed absolute for all its effortlessness. He talks, I mean, you write about how so many men are attracted to her, but she just, pushes them away for whatever reason. And in a sense, I was thinking of Neville as maybe subconsciously, acting out against that by I mean, he's proud that so many men desire his mother and they can't have her, and he just wants to be the exact opposite.
Yeah,
He
no, exactly. I
Yeah,
mean, Audrey Neville's mother was quite a difficult character to write
yeah,
because when I first sort of thought about her,
yeah,
in my head she was this very sort of typical Catholic auntie.
yeah,
She was this quite austere,
yeah,
very religious,
yeah,
quite cold and distant. Auntie with a severe bun and kind of very
yeah,
disapproving, etc.
yeah,
But she didn't seem real to me at all. She
yeah,
just seemed like a stock character from
yeah,
so many books and films, etc. Um, but then I realized the key to unlocking Audrey was to make her hot.
yeah, yeah,
Suddenly that changed everything. She went from the severe Catholic auntie to this very hot Catholic auntie who was very religious, but nonetheless it changed everything. It changed the way the world sees her, the way she relates to the world, and the way that Neville relates to his hot mum, because he does enjoy this kind of revenge by proxy, I suppose
yeah,
you could call
yeah,
it. He's sort of taking revenge on the straight man world
yeah,
who can't have his mother,
yeah,
but
yeah.
who desire her, who sort of endlessly following her down corridors and in supermarkets and in car parks, but they can't have her, and he feels a sort of power, I guess.
Or obligation to the world to go out and give himself to the world.
Yeah, and also he's just sort of kind of mesmerized by the fact that if he had that power,
Yeah,
how would he use it?
yeah,
And to some extent, he does.
he does. Also explains Lorna's attraction, and in a sense, Neville and Lorna's camaraderie about Audrey in that sense. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I do love how determined you are that Lorna's going to be queer. I admire it very, very
I
much.
mean, if you're making the OTT thing, we'll certainly cast it that way. I mean,
Yeah,
enough room
absolutely.
for
I
speculation.
don't think we have any choice in the matter now.
You spoke about, the scene with Hollinghurst, and and you were scared about if it's been done before. But there's one scene which has been done in almost every Bombay book, which is about gay people, which is the train sex scene.
Right, of course. Yeah, the train
And
set. I
that
mean,
is
the
a
thing
rite
is,
of passage for everyone, including my own non-fiction thing. Yours is fiction,
yeah,
supposedly. But uh, I just want to write about that because Pratyush has a story out now in Anandita's anthology, which is set in this railway compartment with the same kind of
right,
frottage, and that
right.
in
Okay.
that sense. And I've written about it as well. So tell me about the unique thing called the Bombay train sex scene.
So, right. So I think this the thing about cruising, I
Yeah,
guess,
yeah,
is that it can happen in these lonely places, in parks or in public loos or wherever.
yeah,
But the other thing that it can happen in it, the other way in which it can happen is in plain sight. That's the other thing. That's the particular charge of a
yeah,
certain kind of male gay life, I
yeah,
think,
yeah,
that it can happen in plain sight. And there is, I think, nothing more charged than the fact that it could be happening in a really crowded Bombay local train compartment surrounded by straight men, because this is a place filled with danger. It's the danger that is completely it's sort of crucial to the excitement in this kind of sex, because you're crammed into a compartment with so many other men, but the level of sort of closeness, physical closeness, means that you could be doing all sorts of things and no one will ever know. But it is dangerous. But it's also sort of sexy and weird, and anything can happen. So I think it's all those elements thrown together. And just like the Rishta scene, we've seen a million Rishta scenes, right? That doesn't mean that you shouldn't write one.
no, no,
You
no.
just gotta make it interesting or
You have
different.
to make it your own. So tell me, how much research did you do for that?
So I have to say that I mean really
How many train rides did you
I
take?
haven't
Yeah.
I haven't been on a Bombay local for a very, very long time, and I regret to say that I haven't had this particular experience. But
It was very good, huh? It read very authentically.
but if you're asking me about a night bus, then I would have to say something different. So let's just say it's an amalgamation
Of yeah,
of different experiences and anecdotes, etc. But I will say that I did have to get it checked by people who might have had this experience.
perfect.
So I think you can never be too careful. You can never assume that this is right.
Yeah, yeah,
And actually, it was really wise that I got it checked because in another part of the novel, I had written something about a reflection in a Bombay train, a
yeah,
local train. And it was pointed out to me that there is now just mesh in those windows. There
yeah.
would not be a reflection.
Correct. Perfect.
So it's these tiny little things that you can get wrong, which
Yeah,
you
yeah,
need someone to pick up on.
yeah.
But I am pretty happy with the Bombay train hand job. I think it's pretty much on the money.
Yep. Perfect. You had a money shot in it as well, so it's perfect.
Right.
Um, you just spoke about how you wrote the final scene first and then you wrote backward, in a sense, right? So just take me just through your writing process. Do you face a window in Mysore? Do you face, where do you
Um,
face? What do you do? Do you start with your day with ice cold Coke? Like,
No, I started with like way too many cups of coffee.
okay,
I suppose like many people, and then I write in scraps. So I'll write something that occurs to me in the middle of the book, something the next day at the beginning, something right at the end. So if we were writing not in the age of computers, I don't know how I'd be doing this. I suppose I'd be writing on index cards or something and trying to stitch it all together. um yeah, so it slowly takes shape like that.
but you have a plot. You know your plot.
I sort of knew the beginning of this and I knew the end. I didn't
Okay,
know a whole lot of the middle. i
okay,
um, I really didn't. That sort of had to happen as it went, as it came. But I but sort of unusually I was pretty confident in this because I really felt like I knew the characters. I felt very at home with them.
yeah,
I didn't feel that these were so unusual that I had to do research about them or anything like that. And I suppose the kind of the fulcrum was always that day when the judgment came down.
yeah, yeah,
In 2018, September 2018, it sort of it sort of acted as a bit of an anchor because it if you were ever stuck, you kind of went back to that day and
yeah,
thought about the ripples before, after, how everything has changed, or has it changed, or you know all of those things. So I would keep returning to that, and
yeah.
then the story seemed to flow.
And where were you? You remember where you were?
I was at home on my own. I'm sure were at a very glamorous party somewhere, awaiting the decision. I, on the other hand, was alone at home, pretending to write, probably in my pajamas still. And it was the afternoon. I seem to recall. Yeah, it was the afternoon,
Yeah,
and it was kind of crazy because it could have gone either way.
yeah,
It really could have gone either way. We had no clue what would happen.
yeah,
And just the fact that it had gone back to the Supreme Court
yeah,
felt miraculous. Just that much felt miraculous.
yeah,
And the fact that we would get another miracle on top of that seemed a little bit far fetched.
yeah,
But it happened. It happened. And I mean, I'm sure where you were, there was euphoria, there was mayhem, there was all of that kind of extremely heightened emotion, which I too felt, and
yeah,
called people.
yeah,
But I remember that very same afternoon, things went very quiet. This huge thing happened, and then life just kind of sort of slowly went back to normal.
yeah.
And even then, I remember thinking, okay, so what now?
Now what now? Yeah,
What now? This is great. This is an incredible thing that has happened, but really, what now?
yeah,
And I guess that's one of the questions the book asks.
completely.
Doesn't attempt to answer, but
Yeah.
does ask. And I don't, even now, sitting here, 2025, I don't know the answer to that question myself. And how can you know? Because there are so many different answers, I think, to that question.
And
What now?
many of the answers are playing out. In fact, I pivoted my entire life and career after that to answer
Yeah.
that what now question,
Yeah.
in so many ways, whether it's employability, whether it is funding queer NGOs, whether it is in
Housing.
whether it is, yeah, I mean, housing for sure, but whether it is in just looking at whether it's in thinking of which further laws to challenge, and the process of challenging these laws takes time, money, and organization, whether it is in just reimagining what a post 2018 landscape looks like at every level of intervention, and trying to solve for some of these has been actually quite interesting, and the changes which have taken place are quite breathtaking
Right.
in the past so many years as well. But I mean, so that what now, but in the context of Half Life, the what now is so much more consequential for Pavan,
Yeah.
because Neville will go back to swiping or whatever,
Yeah.
and his life wasn't so different before or after.
Yeah, I think he will go back to swiping, but also I think he's learned something incredible from this whole encounter or series of encounters, and I think he will, I hope, become a much better person.
Yeah,
You know, I get that sense of him becoming less self-centered, less self-obsessed, and more open to the world in many ways, and possibly being able to create something in the way that he's desiring to, but not really having the motivation to or the energy for, you know. So I feel like the process of coming out hopefully will unlock various things. And I mean, I was talking about this at a session I did before. How do people come out? And there are, there is this very sort of traditional, almost, and I guess quite Western notion of coming out, which
yeah,
is that you sit your parent or whoever it is
yeah,
down and you kind of have this conversation with them.
yeah,
It's all quite serious.
yeah,
I need to tell you something,
yeah,
or you write them a letter or whatever. But I think in certainly in our contexts, in different non-Western contexts, that's not necessarily the case. You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
sometimes you don't need to say anything. You don't. There is an understanding, there is an acceptance, there is love and care and affection, all of those things, without that conversation having taken place.
yeah,
And sometimes because you lack the language, you lack the vocabulary, or you just lack the previous kind of encounters within your own family to have
yeah,
established
yeah,
that kind of conversation. So, it can take place in lots
yeah.
of ways without actually apparently having taken place, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Sometimes just refusing to marry someone whom they are choosing for you is an act of resistance. Sometimes
Yeah,
choosing to be yourself in whatever way you can. I mean,
yeah,
there's so many ways, and I completely resonate with that. There's this range of ways of coming out, and these frameworks or models that uh, which are so you know small in their imaginative capacity of how we can
yeah.
be.
I mean, I think in a lot of families, it would just fill everyone with horror that you had to sit down and talk seriously about
About
anything,
anything. Yeah,
let alone this. So,
yeah.
yes, lots of
And I'm
different.
seeing I'm seeing more and more of that actually, and that's what's so amazing. Even
Yeah,
without the names, even without if you read Maya Sharma's work, for example, with lesbian and trans men mostly in Gujarat, the kind of possibilities that are existing with people living with each other in non-urban, in rural, in small scenarios and settings that you would never imagine as liberal places. But
yeah,
the way people expand the notion of what, say, togetherness is,
yes.
create space for themselves and each other without using these, certain names or titles or processes that, say, we've been used to with Western frameworks, are actually quite enlightening.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know of someone who has never really come out to his
Yeah,
mother and,
yeah,
has been with a partner for a very long time.
yeah,
And when the partner is ill, she sends food parcels, she takes care, she does everything she would do for her own son.
yeah,
But there has been not necessarily any kind of open verbalized acknowledgement of this relationship, but there's been a much more kind of involved acknowledgement, an acknowledgement through actions
Yeah,
and through care and love, without a word having been said. And I don't think that's remotely unusual.
yeah. I had something very similar until recently as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, tell me about the dedication to Shomak. I read it and I had one solitary tear that trickled down my face, and then I had to wipe it because it was affecting my mascara. But tell me about.
Well, that's very cinematic too. Your glistening tear flowing down your face. Well, we're not a couple who really take selfies together, so this is what we have to do. We have to write books, to
Oh,
kind of
it's
do our
very
version
common.
of that. Yeah, and then do a dedication. So it's quite a long drawn process, I would say.
Yeah, but it felt. What does he think of the book?
Well, I
Of the
mean,
writer?
obviously, he has to say that he loves it because there is just no other way for future peace and harmony.
Good,
But I'd like to think there was an element of truth in that.
good. And what are you working on next? Are you a gay writer now? This is it. Are you only going to do gay
No,
books?
I think I'm going to have really butch, like heavy straight men in the next one. I think, yeah, I think
You
it's going
had
to be
one. You had one. He was horrible
right.
in
Yeah.
Darjeeling.
Yeah, no, I think I need to go. It needs to be in like a football club or something like that. Just
And you're
completely.
saying that that's not gay?
No, no, that's true. But as something kind of hyper masculine, I sort of, or maybe I don't know something. Actually, I feel the need to go back to a world of women because this
Hmm.
book was so much about these two men, and of course
Yeah.
there are women in the novel,
Yeah.
and they play important roles. But I did quite miss writing a female protagonist, and I think that's certainly uh, going to be the case in the next one for
You know,
sure.
I'm going to say right about Lorna.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's a good idea.
All the travels with the airlines, you could go back to different times, you could go back to different.
I mean, Lorna's backstory
It's
could
amazing.
be really
It's amazing.
fascinating.
Yeah.
You've certainly set me down the road, I feel.
Yeah, good. Now it's been out for a while, so what have you heard? I mean, what are some of the reactions? What has been a good response? What has been the strangest response you've got so far?
I don't really, to be honest, I really don't hear reactions. I mean, I've read, so it came out in the UK before it came out here,
Yeah,
and there were
yeah,
a lot of reviews, etc.
yeah,
So those I've read, and you know, I'm very grateful to say they have
yeah.
generally been good. But I don't really know. I guess as I go out and about soon, I'm starting the events, all of that from tomorrow actually. So as I meet people, I guess I'll hear more because it's been out for a month here. But although that's not that very long either, so yeah, we shall see. We'll have this conversation in a couple of months, and I'll be able
Wait till
to
this
see.
Not Book Club video goes out. Not has millions of viewers, so just wait. Life
Yeah,
banana.
well, please get in touch and tell me how much you adored it. But don't get in touch if you hated it. That's all I'm saying.
Perfect. And on that note, Mahesh, thank you for writing this book, for doing this Not Book Club conversation with us. Everyone who's watching, the millions of people who are watching, go out and read Half Light, um, rediscover polite society, and follow Mahesh Rao on Instagram.
Thank you, Parmesh. It's been so much fun. Thank you for doing this. And thank you, Denard, for having me.